Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Grendel from Off the Page Games. Grendel is a 2 to 4 player area control game of asymmetric factions. This is a prototype, all rules and components have exchanged, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. Speaking of the crowdfunding campaign and the prototype art, I mentioned 2 to 4 player. I believe there is solo mode for this game, just not on the box quite yet, but I believe, check the campaign page. If you are a solo player, I think they'll have you covered. But with that said, let's go ahead and dive into a loose overview of what Grendel is, how it generally operates, as well as my thoughts and opinions on the game. Grendel is a 2 to 4 player area control asymmetric game. You're going to have different asymmetric factions. It is based on the comic book Grendel, or what it's called, the graphic novel Grendel. This is what Off the Page Games in general, they bring graphic novels / comic books, they bring written works to life to the tabletop. In this case, you are, and I've never read Grendel, so I'll just be talking about the board game part of things. But with that said, this is an area control game in which you're going to take control of one of 4 asymmetric factions, with heavy degrees of asymmetry in terms of how they operate, but with some small degrees of similarity in the types of things you're going to be doing. Because, and before we dive into how these operate over here, the general idea is you have these 3 neighborhoods, 1, 2, and 3. And in each of these neighborhoods, players are going to be slowly adding aggression to these various towers. We'll talk more about how that operates, but basically all you need to know right now is that you're going to be putting tokens into these towers, and that's going to eventually trigger a scoring. I'll show you more exactly how that operates soon, but as you add tokens, eventually a scoring will be triggered. When the scoring is going to be triggered, you enter into the scoring phase, you grab your player over here, you go to the mayhem side over here, and you're going to count up the aggression that you have in the towers. You're going to add it to your personal board over here, so let's move this up a drop so you can see. For example, over here, we'll add up our aggression, we'll move our token that much, and players turn by turn will take turns spending a 3 aggression until they eventually go all the way down to 0. So it's an interesting system where you're adding aggression to the towers, the aggression is going to define how much you have to spend, and then you spend it in chunks until you eventually go down to 0, at which point you score. And scoring can be different for each player. I might score at my turn because I went down to 0, and you might score in another turn when you go down to 0, which is nice, by the way, because it gives you elements of being able to control things before you score. Whatever, I'll get to more of that in thoughts and opinions. But basically, you're going to trigger a scoring, spend resources to carry out additional actions before the scoring commences, at which point you score that particular neighborhood. Now, you're only going to score each neighborhood once. You score the first neighborhood whenever the towers trigger, then you score the second neighborhood when that tower triggers, and then you score the third neighborhood, but the third neighborhood does have a rule that's worth noting, which is you're going to go back and score the first 2 neighborhoods, not with all the manipulation stuff, but you're going to score the first 2 neighborhoods one more time. That ensures that nobody goes running after each neighborhood scored. You're not like, abandon all ship, let's go all the way somewhere else. No, other things are still going to be in place. You need to try to preserve some degree of presence in those areas. That's it. That's the game. As far as what you're going to score a point for each neighborhood if you are able to achieve your scoring criteria, which is different based on the factions. The police score if they have more units than anyone else. So for example, let's move this guy over here. Right now, if we were to score this neighborhood, the police would score only this one area. Over here, they score nothing because they have presence, but not more than anyone else. And then over here, they're going to score 2 points because they have both of these more than any other player. The mob is going to score wherever they have 2 or more piece types. So for example, in this neighborhood over here, they would not score here, they would score here and here because these 2 are different types of pieces, as are this token and that piece, so they'd score for those 2 regions. Grendel over here, Grendel's going to score wherever they have fear tokens, which I don't have any on the board right now, but you're going to be doing lots of things that are going to place fear tokens on the board, and as you do that, you'll get points for having those tokens in play. And similarly, Argent is going to do the exact same thing with their tokens, so again, whenever you have these tokens in play, and you can have shielded and non-shielded sides, we'll talk more about that as well, but they're going to score for presence with those tokens. So again, police have the most, the mob have 2 types, Grendel and Argent, for their particular tokens on the board. But you're trying to manipulate the game so that you are set up to have a lot of aggression in the tower when it scores, and so that you're well primed to be able to score as much as possible when that particular neighborhood scores. That's where we go to the individual puzzles that these characters have, because each one brings their own mechanics to the table. The police are working with a rondel over here. They're using a rondel where every turn you're going to move a car, and you can move it 1 or 2 spaces, but you can, if you are adjacent to a car, to the other paddy wagon over here, then you're going to be able to arrest other players' pieces. That's going to give you an interesting element where you can unlock and upgrade by arresting other players' pieces, and you have to choose what's more important, taking the actions you want on this particular rondel, or alternatively getting that extra arrest in, reducing the amount of opponent's pieces on the table, while you also upgrade yourself. So that's going to be the main little balance you try to be mindful of in this rondel rondel system. The mob is going to be dice allocation. You'll roll your dice, and then you'll use those dice to assign them to various elements. Over here we can have 2 equal symbols over here. We can place this one down over here. So you're going to choose different options as far as how you place your dice in order to put more people on the board, to upgrade, to put more tokens out, to clean out, bribe, all of those things as you deal with the dice allocation. Grendel is doing bag pulling. Bag building, I guess, because there is a degree of bag building in the game. You're going to start by taking these tokens out of the bag, and you're going to place them down. You can place them anywhere you want to take that action. So for example, I could place it down over here to take that action over here, drawing a card. But also, when I take this next token, I could put it again over here, but this time I'm going to put it over here and take this action. But also, because it matches the type, which I could have done with this as well, but I was trying to show you this, because it matches the type, you also get an additional bonus. I'll draw again over here, and this one, because I'm going to put it down over here, I'll get the bonus for matching the type. There's 3 different types over here. But this time round, you also get to activate everything to the left and the token itself. So you get more upgrades as you place things out on your board. And then yes, you'll also be able to slowly upgrade your bag. This is bag building after all. With these advanced tokens, removing some of the other tokens from play and putting advanced tokens into your bag. So bag building. And then lastly, Argent is going to be a bit of a push your luck mechanic because you're going to be flipping these cards over here in order to take various actions, but you need to be mindful of the number of skulls lest you bust. Now bust is not going to result in you getting nothing, but you still want to avoid it happening. Fortunately, you do have the ability to go ahead and trash 1 card each round, so you have some degree of control, but the choice of what you trash, what you play, all of that is going to define their push your luck engine. So again, we have our rondel, we have a dice placement, we have bag building, and then we have push your luck as the 4 main mechanics of these factions. That's going to be the core idea of how they operate, but they all have similar, well, that's going to be the core distinctions of how they operate, but past that, they all have similar ideas as far as what they're trying to do, from placing various characters on the board, from placing various tokens on the board, to shielding tokens, to attacking others, to degrading tokens, to upgrading the board, all while you try to work your way towards scoring. Oh, and then of course putting aggression in the tower, which I guess is a good time to go ahead and show you how these tower scorings work, because it's kind of cool. I'm just going to grab a bunch of tokens and slowly drop things in. Because as players have the opportunity to put things into the tower, as you put these tokens in, which I'm going to go ahead and slowly do it, eventually the counterweight, and these are weighted for the number of players, so a 4-player game has a different token over here, but eventually there's going to be a moment where something... Not yet. There we go. Eventually, the weight of these tokens, and they are differently weighted, they're going to collapse, releasing all the tokens, and that's going to define the aggression that all the players have in those areas. So you are playing a literally loaded, you're working with a loaded, not gun, but a loaded weight in this game, which is going to determine when the areas score. That's the basic idea of Grendel without going into all the individual faction rules, because the game itself is very straightforward, but learning each faction, that's where the nuance comes into play as far as the individual details of them. But past that, it's area control, asymmetric factions, work your way towards scoring each of the 3 areas. Once you do so, do a final scoring for the prior 2 areas. Each faction has a unique way of scoring as well as a unique way of getting things done, and do so more efficiently than the other players to win the game. With that, let's go ahead and dive into my general thoughts on this game. And I generally like Grendel. I think Grendel has there's a little bit of a small asterisk there because we'll get to the asterisk part shortly. But Grendel is satisfying as far as giving you different factions. I have not played as all the factions, but I've played with all the factions, so to speak. Does that make sense? I have not played as all the factions. I've played with all the factions. So I've had a chance to see them all in play, but I don't know fully the ins and outs of each faction. In fact, one of the things that is a slight complaint is that even to the factions I've played as, I find I still have to check the sheets on them, particularly around one of my pet peeves. We're getting into pet peeves, I guess. We're going out of order here, but we're getting to pet peeves over here. The destroy rewards for each faction, I wish they were printed on the player aids. These player aids do a great job of distilling the core idea of how each faction operates, but I think they need player aids for both the various symbols of each faction, as well as the destroy rewards of each faction, because for the most part, they're pretty intuitive, and again, the commonalities make it easier, so symbols that are common across the factions are easier, but some symbols are more unique across each faction, so I think it really could benefit from a player aid that gives you the symbology as well as the destroy rewards. The destroy rewards in particular was something that I found that I had to constantly go back to the rules to reference, which isn't the end of the rule, but a player aid would have made the experiences a lot more, and like even past the first game, I just find that you're dealing with 4 different factions. It's not just about learning how a game works, it's about learning how each faction works, and that's where the nuance is going to come in. So one of my bigger pet peeves with the game is hopefully easily solvable with a player aid that gives you the symbology and the destroy rewards. As of right now, I have a player aid that gives me the mayhem structure, which is nice, but honestly that's a little easier to remember in my opinion. And then the uniqueness of the faction, which again, I feel that is These are the easier things to remember, maybe not at first, but after a turn or two, you're pretty straight as far as how to run your turn. The nuances come in with the things that are different turn to turn, because, for example, rolling 4 dice and placing them, that's going to be the same every single time you take a turn. But which symbols you activate, what each symbol means, the destroy rewards, which are only relevant when you're destroying certain things, those are stuff that are different game to game, or not game to game, turn to turn. Those things that are different turn to turn, or game to game if you are playing as a different faction, and that's where I feel a player could have benefited, making the game a lot more streamlined and easy to play through. So honestly, that's one of my biggest complaints right now, which is more of a prototype complaint than a final game complaint, but it did definitely affect my ease of experience in the game. Outside of that, the only complaint, because now that we're doing this out of order anyway, the only real complaint I'd say is I am mindful that I'm never really confident on balance on these things, and I do think that you'll have a much better time with the strategy of the game, not necessarily the fun of the game. With the strategy of the game, I think you'll have a better time once you've played through every faction that is in play. Meaning you might be playing a 3-player game, so you don't need to know the police if the police aren't in play, but if you're playing a 3-player game with the Mob, Grendel, and Argent, and you're playing as Grendel, you will have an easier time strategically if you have played as Argent and as the Mob, and so you have a better understanding of the nuances of what they're trying to do. It's easy. The high level stuff is pretty easy. Like, okay, great, if you're the Mob, you're going to score by having 2 different tokens. So for me to deny you scoring, I have to go ahead and take out your separate tokens whenever you have them to limit your scoring. That kind of core idea is easy to remember, and honestly, it's most of what you need to know. But the ins and outs of, oh my gosh, I can't believe you upgraded that die slot and now you're doing this, I should have seen that coming because I knew you upgraded, those kinds of ins and outs you'll benefit from having played each faction. So again, it's a minor complaint that affects the strategic payoff of the game, but I don't think it affects the overall enjoyment of the experience, which is where we can move to all the good stuff. Because overall, the game is fun. The game is fun, giving you a game that, first of all, the length is not that bad, coming in at generally around the hour-and-a-half mark. It does depend on player count for sure, but I'd say generally, honestly, even less than an hour and a half, the hour 20-ish or so. It moves pretty quickly overall, especially after your first game, once you know the ins and outs. Well, not even ins and outs. Once you just know how your faction runs and you're not guiding all the players. I'm the person who teaches my group, and so for me, the first turns can be a little slower as I teach everyone a unique way that their faction operates, which is what you have to do. The core idea is pretty simple, but it's like, okay, Bob, it's your turn, you're doing this, and this, and this, and that symbol is that, and that's how you upgrade. So you do have a slower first turn for first game. After your first game, I think it goes pretty quickly, generally coming in at under the 90 minutes, while also giving you a degree of fun. Fun is the key thing. You're upgrading stuff. You're playing with a tableau. I didn't even talk about the fact that you have these decks of cards, and these decks of cards are incredibly satisfying, the unique decks of each character, and these are meant to be a surprise, although again, going back to my earlier point, if I've played as a, Argent, I'll know some of the cards that you might be able to play to affect me in different ways, so it definitely will give me a leg up. But outside of that, I think going into the first few games, no one really expects that knowledge of information. And so just having these cards that are fun for you to play, that really make you feel powerful, on top of your core idea of how your faction is asymmetric in the game, those are just going to have you playing a fun experience. If you're playing as Grendel, trying to get an accelerated aspect of actions, Grendel I think is my favorite from what I've played as, although honestly the dice, they're fun. They're fun. They're all fun in what they do. But Grendel having the ability to take cascading actions that get more powerful until your row clears and resets and you're adding more tokens, you just feel like you're able to do more, especially if you're playing only as one character, because Argent and Grendel have less forces, so to speak, so they have to be more powerful to spread around, to get their tokens out, to hook people around, pulling them into their area, different things like that. But the game is satisfying because you are able to upgrade, you're able to do a lot, your turns are satisfying, your deck is satisfying, the asymmetry is satisfying, and even the scoring aspect, I mentioned I'd come back to this, even the scoring sequence, I love the way it staggers the scoring so that it's not a all-at-once kind of scoring. This is something that DEI, Divide et Impera, does, and I love it because it lets the players all feel like they are able to get stuff out of the system. What I mean by that is there's not a singular point where you say, okay, and now we're just weighing up the entire board and scoring, well, in the entire neighborhood, and scoring it. Rather, the scoring triggers for each player when their aggression hits 0, and that means you do have some degree of control over, even if you just had a good scoring round. Even if you just scored and you just had a good scoring round, I might still be about to spend some aggression, change up the landscape, and then score for myself. That kind of shared dynamics where you can stagger your scoring so that everyone feels a little bit rewarded, I feel that is a good, just general player experience. I like when players are able to feel powerful and cool and they can do things that are fun in the game as opposed to feeling constricted. And Grendel definitely does that, and it gives you the variability of the experience because you want to dive into different factions. You want to explore the nuances of a faction, but you also want to dive into different factions. And when it comes to like these kind of asymmetric games out there, Some are more about the puzzle, others are more about the game. I think Grendel does a good job doing both, meaning it is about the puzzle of your faction, but because it's so tightly intertwined, it's not just about your puzzle, it's very much about how your puzzle affects the board state, because it's an area control game at its core, and it's all about the control of the board and making sure you're set up for success while trying to minimize your opponents as much as possible. So overall, some nitpicks that definitely get in the way, primarily, hopefully, just prototype issues, especially if they can get, again, if they can get a play rate with Symbology and the token, the destruction rewards, that would be everything I need to make the accessibility part pretty straightforward. After that, there's the mindfulness about the fact that you'll have a better strategic time once you know the ins and outs of who you're playing against. But aside from those two complaints, this is a satisfying game where you get to feel like you're having a fun time as you play through it, and I value fun in the game, and Grendel definitely delivers that fun. For me, I'm going to come in at a 4 out of 5. I've overall enjoyed my gameplays of Grendel so far. I don't have any opinions on balance. I think I need a lot more plays before I could say, like, I have no clue if one faction is more balanced, it's more powerful than another. That time will tell. But for right now, I'm having fun with the experience. If you're looking for other game recommendations, first of all, definitely check out Root if you are looking to take your area control asymmetry up to the next level. I think Root gives you an even deeper experience, but also one that is honestly much more rules heavy. Grendel, despite the fact that you have to teach 4 different factions, it is pretty rules light on each faction, which makes it relatively accessible in the degree of these asymmetric types of experiences. And if you want to go full cooperative with asymmetry, check out Massive Darkness 2 from CMON that has, again, a similar kind of experience. You're working with your own little puzzle, but then you're doing so with a shared dungeon crawler while you attempt to take out the baddies along the way. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.